our topic in this section is critical thinking versus creative thinking. There is so much debate about the differences between these two types of thinking. Of course, while there are many things on them regarding how different they are, we must understand that there is no human who only has one. It's impossible to think creatively if we don't have any critical thinking. It's impossible to think critically and be with no creative thinking whatsoever. But this is just going to help us to see that even though they are inseparably linked, it's difficult to divorce creative thinking from the critical thinking. There are some differences between the two. Well, we can identify these differences, but there is no doubt that the two go hand in hand. They are like the left hand from the right hand. Of course, the left hand is the left hand, the right hand the right hand, but they work together. They work together. It's impossible to clap with the right hand alone. No, the left hand alone. But we clap with the two. In the same way, critical thinking may have something unique to it, and creative thinking may have something absolute to it. But the two together, we can clap as both creative and critical thinkers. And the two are used to solve problems that we have around. So yes, we'd like to just take a few. If you check the internet, you have a tall list. But we just want to discuss a few in terms of what differentiates the two and some critical thinking skills as well as some creative thinking skills. But just by name, you could see that there is some meaning that even the names hold. Critical thinking is more critical, follows a particular style, while creative thinking has to be creative, new, making something new. But let's look at some of the differences. Critical thinking is said to be selective because it follows a particular pattern. It is selective. But creative thinking is generative because it creates new things that are generated. So it is not as selective as critical thinking is. Then critical thinking is procedural. It follows particular procedures. When we discussed inductive reasoning, differentiating between facts and opinions, and deductive reasoning, we saw that you can't do things anyhow and call it deductive reasoning. It has to follow particular procedure which is laid out. If you don't follow the procedure or the process, your conclusions will be disastrous. So critical thinking is procedural, while creative thinking is broad or thinking outside the box. Of course, in the modern world, there is no box anymore. So we'll say more of thinking broadly. It doesn't follow a particular process or procedure. It is open thinking. Open thinking. Then critical thinking is restrictive. For example, if you are using deductive reasoning, where you have to go by a major premise, a minor or particular premise, and come to your conclusion, this is restrictive. You cannot call it deductive reasoning if you do not follow that process. But if you come to creative thinking, it's limitless. This follows a particular system, as we've discussed. But this one is person-based. So when we say logic, for example, logic is not owned by an individual. Logic is a universal standard that everybody follows. Everybody follows. But when it comes to creative thinking, it is person-based. Person-based. But critical thinking is systematic. It follows a particular, well-acclaimed system, not person-based. That is why a critical thinker is more of a universal person. And then a creative thinker is more person-based. Now we want to look at some critical thinking skills. And when we began our discussion on critical thinking and look at some definitions, you might have come to see some of these words. And these are the skills that critical thinkers need. Is that supposed to mean that a creative thinker doesn't need these skills? No, not at all. It doesn't mean that. Yes, creative thinkers also use this type of skills. But this is more tilted towards critical thinking, which is more procedural, more restrictive, more systematic than creative thinking, which is more person-based, more open, more thinking outside the box, which doesn't exist anymore, broadly thinking. So yes, we're going to look at some of them that we already saw when we were discussing the definitions, some definitions of critical thinking. So interpreting, to be able to look at things and draw a conclusion from it. So you are interpreting. And it involves what? Analyzing. Analyzing. A lot of brain work goes into it. Analyzing things because you want to end at the right conclusion. So investigators engage in a lot of critical thinking. They are able to interpret things and analyze things, and eventually they are able to narrow down their investigation to a particular person. Sometimes it turns out to be that person. Critical thinking is good. Connecting things. They listen to someone's voice and then they hear another voice. They could connect. The voice sounds the same. This is a slight difference. They're able to connect things. And then integrating. They put things together, evaluating, making sure that what they are concluding is what is the thing. If it is not, they have to go elsewhere. They infer. They're able to infer from one place to the other. If it is this, it's likely to be that. They infer. And of course, comparing things. So you could see some investigative movies, and you could see that investigators consider no, the one accused is not capable of committing such a crime because his or her history shows that that crime is not part of his or her history. So they're able to compare things. They contrast things too. They classify, put things according to similarities and differences. Sequencing, which one comes before, which one follows. Patterning, they're able to see clearly which are in a particular, which have a particular pattern, which do not. And of course they reason. And they forecast, they can project, they can hypothesize, this is likely to happen because of these and these reasons. And of course they critic, they want to be sure of things. All these involve a lot of mental work, a lot of patience, a lot of hard work, a lot of time. So critical thinking is really, really involving. Then, on the other hand, we have creative thinking. Well, are we saying that what we have listed under creative thinking has got nothing to do with critical thinking? We are not saying that. A critical thinker has all of these too. But we are just trying to show that the two belong to different categories, but of course they work hand in hand, as we demonstrated with the left and the right hands. So creative thinkers are open-minded, very open-minded, broad mind. They don't follow a particular procedure at all. They are very open-minded. And they are flexible. They could start from A and they end up being on Z. So not that they have to finish with A. No, they're very flexible. And of course it involves a lot of imagination or creativity. A lot of imagination. They are adaptable. They can change quickly. And they take risks. Sometimes risk-taking is not so much of a quality of critical thinking. But creative thinkers, sometimes they don't be sure, but they just want to do it and see what happens. That is more creative than critical. And then originality. They are very original. Sometimes something comes up from somebody's pure imagination. Uh, you look at some of the movies, I think Tarantino is one uh, the director who comes up with very interesting ideas, and people really applaud his imagination in the kind of movies he's able to produce. So originality, because of the imaginative power of the one behind it. Then they elaborate, the elaboration, they take time, they're able to imagine things here and there. And brainstorming, which is also a quality of critical thinking, of course. They think, what ideas should come. We want to see whether we can put feathers on people's arms so they can fly. Is that possible? I think it's possible. If birds can do it, humans can do it. So ideas, how do we do it? So brainstorming. And then they have imagery, mental pictures. They can sit down and then picture a human flying, not in a plane, but actually flying by flapping his or her arms. Imagery. And then as they get the imagery, they want to start work eventually. Of course, most of the things we have, almost all everything we have that has come to make life easier are products of creative and critical thinking. The television, somebody imagines that, can we see people far away? Creative thinking. And then a critical thinker gets to work, and all of them eventually, yes. Today we have a television set, we have a mobile phone, we have a plane that can take you to America, wherever, within 6 hours. Something that could be done by 4 parents in months and months. By a click of a button, you can speak to somebody. You know, it's interesting. So technology, for example, is a brainchild of critical and creative thinking. And these have come to make life very easy. So while the focus is not to say that this creative thinking and critical thinking are distinct, they don't relate to each other. The focus is that, of course, they relate to each other. They are like the left hand and the right hand, but they have their unique characteristics. So these are just about the differences and the skills of critical thinking and creative thinking. Have a nice time.